Hey, fourth graders, can you believe it? We're finished with quarter one. We just finished our multiplication unit, but it doesn't mean that we're done with multiplication because we're moving into division, which is the inverse operation of multiplication. So we definitely need to take a look at some of the misconceptions that we had in our multiplication unit, and probably the best way to do that is just to go through the test that you previously took. We're going to focus mostly also on the lattice strategy and the traditional strategy, since we already had a video all about the area model and the expanded or partial product strategy. Now, before we start our review, let's take a look at our riddle this week. Our riddle this week is all about a math sequence. Now, sequences are basically a list of numbers, and you basically have to figure out what number comes next in the sequence. So it's 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, and we need to know what this number is. This is a very challenging sequence, so you're probably going to have to rely on me for some of the hints. But one sequence that you probably know of is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that is just adding 1 each time. That's how we basically count. Obviously, the number 2 and the number 3 are missing. The number 8 is missing. The number 10 is missing. There's definitely a reason for that. But keep thinking about the sequence, and maybe you'll come up with that reason without even my hints. Alright, let's look at some of the test questions. We're going to focus on the multiple choice. This was the very first question on your test. It says, which statement is not true? Now, I told you that one of the best ways to deal with this type of question is to go choice by choice, trying to figure out what each one of these expressions is actually equal to. So 50 times 50, I know that this is the quick trick. 5 times 5 is equal to 25. Attach 1 0, that's equal to 250. I know 60 times 40 is equal to 240 with the quick trick, because 6 times 4 is equal to 24. And that is a true statement. However, we are looking for a not true statement, so I'm not going to stop right there. I look at B, and I'm kind of disappointed because I'm looking and I'm saying, oh, no quick trick here, darn it. So I'm going to have to move on to C to see if there's any hope there. C and D look like they probably have some quick trick. 70 times 6 is equal to 420 when I use the quick trick, because 7 times 6 is equal to 42. Attach 1 0. 50 times 8, that is equal to 400, because 5 times 8 is equal to 40, and then I attach 1 0. 420 is larger than or greater than 400, so as a true statement. Again, I'm looking for a not true statement, so that's not what I'm looking for. 40 times 4 is 160. And 80 times 2 is also equal to 160. And that is also a true statement that 160 equals 160. Looks like B is probably going to be my answer. However, I'm not just going to trust that, because maybe I made a really simple mistake in A, C, or D. I'm just going to look at B, and I'm going to use let's say the traditional strategy. So I'm going to pull this over here, do some work. 45 times 6, I'm going to write it vertically, because that's part of the traditional or standard algorithm. Very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute the 6 to the ones place. I have to distribute to the ones place first, not to the tens place. So 6 times 5 is my very first thing. 6 times 5 is equal to 30. So I'm going to put my 0 down. I can't have 2 digits in my ones place, so I'm going to carry my 3 into my tens column. 6 times 4 is equal to 24, and then I'm going to add the 3, making it 27. So 24 plus 3 is equal to 27. So 45 times 6 must equal 270. Now let's move on to 75 times 3. So I have 75 times 3. I'm writing it vertically. I know that 5 times 3 is equal to 15, so I'm going to carry my 1. 3 times 7 is equal to 21. I'm going to add the 1 that's on top, making it 22. So 75 times 3 is a product of 225. And now I'm going to ask myself, is this a true statement that 270 is less than 225? And that is not a true statement, which, since it's not true, this is actually my answer. So B is the correct answer here. Let's move on to the second question on your test. It says, John used the double-digit array, in other words, a double-digit array model, to solve a multiplication problem. So he's doing this multiplication problem and wants to know what problem John was trying to solve with this array. Now, I've told you in the past to always ignore the answer choices as much as possible. You did not have to use raced here just because you're not actually solving the problem, but I would still ignore this, because I will tell you right now that the only 2 answers that were chosen on the test from you all was A and B. No one chose C, no one chose D, which is good. But I want you to look at this problem here. I have one factor that is here and one factor that is here. Now, we know the area model we break it into its expanded form. So this is actually equal to 25. That's one factor. And then the other factor is 42. So in order to do this problem, 42 times 25, this is the work that you would use to solve for that. Now, those of you who quickly went through this problem might have chosen A, because look at the digits. They are exact same digits as in B, but if you read too quickly, you might accidentally choose A. But the correct answer is B, because 42 times 25 is what we came up with, and obviously trying to ignore those answer choices to the best of your ability will help you out the most. Let's look at question number 3. We had to use the race strategy here, so I'm writing that here just so that I know I have to follow through all these different steps. Raced, read carefully is what R is. So I'm on R, which is the best estimate of 42 times 74. In order to read carefully, that means I have to definitely comprehend what I am reading to make sure that I really understand what's happening. I need to basically use rounding for 42 times 74. That's what I have to do, so I'm going to check that off. I know what I have to do. A means to ignore your answer choices. So I'm going to... One handy thing that I can do on here is actually cover up my answer choices. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to cover them up. Whoops. Don't do that. Let's see. I'm going to cover up them by using this. There we go. So I'm going to cover them up. And I'm going to try and solve this my own way. 42 times 74. Now, I don't really know if they want me to round before or after. So let's just say I'm going to use the lattice strategy, and I'm going to do it after, because I don't really know. So let's see. I'm going to make my box. I'm going to make my diagonal lines. I'm going to put 42 on top and 74 on the right. I don't need to use expanded form for lattice. And now it's just basically going through my multiplication facts. In order to figure out this box here, I would look above and to the right. I would multiply 2 times 7, which is equal to 14. This box here, I would do 4 times 7, which is equal to 28. 2 times 4 is equal to 8, but it doesn't have any 10, so I'm going to put a 0 and then an 8. And then 4 times 4 is equal to 16. And the next step I would have to do is to add my diagonals. So I ignore everything on the outside. I'm just going to look at the inside of my boxes here. I'm going to add anything in the diagonals. So here I have just an 8. Here I have 4 plus 0 plus 6, which is equal to 10. I can only have one digit in each section here, so I'm going to carry over my 1 into the next place value column. 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, plus 8 is equal to 10, plus 1 is equal to 11. So I'm going to carry my 1 over again. 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. My final step is to just attach all these numbers together, making it 3,108. So I've created my own answer. My next step is just to check it. I'm going to use the traditional strategy to check. So I'm going to do 42 times 74. I know that 4 times 2 is equal to 8. I know that 4 times 4 is equal to 16. And once I have done that, I basically am done with my 4. And now I look at my 7. Now before I look at my 7, I'm going to put my placeholder in. Remember, that's just preventing me from putting anything into the ones place, because now I'm in the tens column, so I have to start in the tens. And that placeholder prevents you from putting anything into the ones. So now I'm going to do 7 times 2, which is equal to 14. I'll put my 4 down, carry the 1. 7 times 4, which is equal to 28. I'm going to add my 1, making it 29. And I'm going to add these two numbers together, creating a product of 3,108. Now, knowing that I just got 3,108, my check kind of makes sense to me because I did a completely different strategy. I still came up with 3,108. So I'm feeling pretty good about that answer. Now let's take a look at the choices. So first thing I do is I'm going to start eliminating options that really just don't make sense. That's what E stands for, eliminate poor choices. So I'm in that process right now. 115, that is way too low. I'm not even close to that with my answer, so I know that doesn't make sense. 1,800, that is also much lower. It's not even remotely close to 3,108. And now I'm left with C and D. Now here's the problem that some of you ran into. If you rounded after, I would round this to 3,100 or possibly 3,000. I definitely would not round this to 3,500. I don't really know how they're coming up with that. However, I still don't see 3,100 or 3,000, so maybe what they did is they rounded before. Let me just double check. Let's see what happens if I round before. 42 is about 40. 74 is about 70. That's actually the quick trick right there. 4 times 7 is equal to 28. And then I attach 2 zeros. And it looks to me like they probably rounded before, because I got 2,800 with the quick trick. However, even if you round after, for example, 2,800 is closer to 3,000 or 3,100. It's only either 200 away or 300 away from either of these two numbers. Whereas 3,500 is either 400 or 500 away from either of these two numbers. So D is even farther away from 3,100 or 3,000. So still, even if you round after, you're still going to come up with choice C. But the easiest way, after thinking about it, is probably to round before. Does my answer make sense? Well, yes, it does, because I know that using the quick trick, 40 times 70, 4 times 7 is equal to 28. And I attach my 2 zeros, and 2,800 is the correct answer. All right, let's look at this question really quickly. I'm not going to go through all of race just because of time's sake. But if I was to ignore these answer choices, I'm only looking at this right here. It says Brian has 4 apple pies that are cut into 8 slices each. So I know that in order to figure out how many slices that is, well, each pie, if I have 1 pie that's cut into 8 slices, that means that that's 8 slices per pie, or 8 slices each pie. And if there's 4 of them, that means that's 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, or 8 times 4, which is equal to 32 slices. So the first thing I had to do was multiply 4 times 8. Then it says he and 5 friends eat 12 slices. So the total of these 6 people ate 12 slices. It doesn't say each, it says eats 12 slices. So I know that total, amongst those 6 people, they ate 12 slices. So if I'm eating something, that means it's going away. So I'm going to subtract, and now I'm left with 20 slices. It says, which shows one way to find the number of slices that Brian has left. Well, I'm going to think back to what I did. Well, in order to get 32, I did 8 times 4, or 4 times 8. In order to get 20, I had to subtract 12. So I'm looking for something that the very first step is to multiply 4 by 8, and then I subtracted 12. Now, the only one that matches that is choice B. And just for time's sake, if I had gone through, I would have eliminated these as well, and asked myself, does my answer make sense? Going through that race strategy certainly would help you to make sure that you got this correct. Let's take a little brain break. Let's take a look at our riddle one more time. What number comes next in this sequence? Now, before I discussed with you that the number 2 and the number 3 were missing, so was the number 10, and so was the number 8. Notice it just goes 1, it skips 2 and 3 to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is missing, 9, 10 is missing, 11. I want you to think about, here's my first clue to you. Usually, for these type of sequences, you have to add or subtract or multiply or divide. In this case, it's actually not one of those type of patterns. This is a riddle. It is a very challenging riddle. I want you to think about these spellings of the numbers. So 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11. And I want you to think about how all of those numbers are missing a certain letter. So for example, in these 4 numbers, they are not in the sequence because they all have the same letter that these numbers are all missing. So try and figure out what that letter might be, and we'll take a look at that as we end the video. All right, let's take a look at the next question here. Again, just because of time, I did want to review race with you, but I know that we could spend pretty much double the amount of time if I went through all of race with you on each and every problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to focus on just one strategy and how to solve each of these. A plumbing services special house call rate is $94 per hour. If at the end of the month they did 18 hours of house call related work, how much did they earn from the service? $94 per hour essentially means that she makes $94 each hour. So if there's 18 hours, well, each hour she makes $94. So that's like saying $94 plus $94 plus $94 18 times, or just 94 times 18. Let's take a look at using that traditional strategy. 8 times 4, very first step I'm going to do, is equal to 32. Carry my 3. 8 times 9 is equal to 72. I'm going to add the 3, making it 75. And since I'm done with my 8 now, I've distributed the 8, I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to get rid of any work that I had from the 8, so that includes any regrouping that I've done. And I'm going to put my placeholder down, just so that I know that I'm moving on to the 1. So now I'm going to do 1 times 4, which is equal to 4. 1 times 9, which is equal to 9. Now notice, just kind of like the expanded strategy with 2 by 2, a bow tie is still created. So just in case you're wondering, did I make sure to multiply all the numbers? You still should create a bow tie when you're doing a 2 by 2. So now I'm going to add these two numbers together to get my product. I get 2 plus 0 is 2, 5 plus 4 is 9, 7 plus 9 is equal to 16. I'll put my comma in. 1,692 would be the correct answer. And again, I would use race just to double check that. Some of you chose C. We have to be very careful because the only difference is in the tens place, where choice C has a 6, whereas choice D has a 9. So definitely double check the math there. This one we kind of went over already in class. Remember, this is 2 different ways that you had to try to figure out that you can multiply 42 times 3. And we talked about how A would not be a good possibility. B, this strategy would work, but 40 times 3 is not the same thing as 42 times 3, so B would not work. And so we left it down to C and D. Now, both of them have repeated addition of 42 plus 42 plus 42, which is a great strategy. So both of those are true statements. It's just that when we are looking at C and D, this is the expanded or the algebraic way of multiplying numbers. Remember, 42 can be split into 40 plus 2, and 3, the expanded form is just 3. So when I multiply these numbers together, I can do 3 times 2 and 3 times 40. Well, the only one that has that is 3 times 2 and 3 times 40, so C is the correct answer. D, this would work, but this would not, because adding that to this answer would make it larger than 42 times 3, so this would not be an acceptable answer either, so C is the correct answer. All right, which area model or array model represents 64 times 27? Looking at this, we are going to solve this our own way, because if we were using the race strategy, obviously we would not be looking at the answers. So looking at this, I would take 64 and split it into its expanded form of 60 plus 4. Since we're using the area model, of course, we have to use expanded form. 27 is the same thing as 20 plus 7. And I'm going to split this into 4 sections because this is a 2 by 2, so 2 columns, 2 rows. And now I'm going to do the quick trick. So 60 times 20, well, 6 times 2 is equal to 12. I'm going to attach 2 zeros. 20 times 4 is equal to 80. 60 times 7 is equal to 420. And then 7 times 4, which is equal to 28. First thing that I'm going to do before I start looking at the answer choices is I'm going to add all these numbers together, starting with the largest number and working my way down. And as I add these two numbers together, I realize that my solution, or my sum to all these add-ins, is an 8 in my ones, a 12 in my tens, so I'm going to carry my 1. I come up with a 7 in my hundreds and a 1 in my thousands, making it 1,728. So my sum is equal to 1,728. As I'm looking at all these, after, if I was to check my work and come up with 1,728 using a different strategy, the only one that matches is A. And obviously, if you went through the race strategy, you would spend a little bit more time trying to analyze B, C, and D, but they just do not make sense. Notice A, the work, matches identical to my work here, and I didn't even have to look at A. Whereas if I maybe looked at these answer choices, I might have accidentally chosen B, C, or D, because I might have trusted the test creators. This was the last multiple choice question, and we're going to wrap this up. It says, what number should replace the question mark in this box? So this is the array model or area model. And I told you to think about what number might belong here. Now you need this number in order to calculate the question mark, because the question mark is calculated by doing 20 times whatever is here. Well, one way to figure out whatever this number is to think 3 times something over here gives me 9. 3 times something gives me 9. I know one of my basic facts is 3 times 3 gives me 9, so I'm going to put a 3 here. Now that I know that 3 exists over here, I can now do 20 times 3, will give me my question mark. Well, that's the quick trick. 2 times 3 is equal to 6. Attach 1, 0. So B must be my answer. All right, let's wrap this up by looking at this riddle one more time. Remember, I told you that all of these numbers do not have a certain letter, whereas, for example, the number 2, if I was to write that, is spelled with TWO. The number 3 that's also missing from this list is spelled THREE. The number 8 is spelled EIGHT. And the number 10 is spelled TEN. Or sorry, TEN, yes. But all these numbers are missing from our sequence because they have a letter that none of these numbers actually have. And I'm going to bring it to your attention right now because even with this hint, it may be a challenge to even figure out what this number is. I want you to look. All of these 4 numbers that are missing from this sequence have a letter T. Whereas 1 does not have a T, 4 does not, 5 does not, 6 does not, 7 does not, 9 does not, and 11 does not. The next number in this sequence is going to be larger than 11, and it is the next number in the entire universe that does not have a T in it. So you start thinking, well, does 12 work? Well, no, 12 does have a T. 13? No, 13 does have a T. 14? Nope. 14 has a T. So notice, you're going to have to keep trying to figure out what is that number. And I will just give you one last hint. It's a lot larger than any of these numbers. These are relatively small. But the next number that does not have a T is relatively large. And I'm going to leave it at that. Good luck.